नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स. So today we will be continuing to study the part 2 of the book 6. On the part 2 is titled as His Enemies, and in this part 2 we have 7 subparts, and among the 7 subparts we have what is called the charge of conversion by glamour. That was a charge on the Buddha, that he's converting the people by glamour. Charge of being a parasite, that was another charge on the Buddha, that he was a parasite. He was living on the money of other people. The third was a charge of breaking happy household. So there was a third charge against the Buddha, that he was breaking the happy households. And the fourth was Jains and the false charge of a murder. So there was a false charge on murder accused by the Jains. And then fifth, Jains and a false charge of immorality. That was another of the things that his enemies tried to do. And sixth, Devadatta, a cousin and an enemy. That was the sixth subpart, and 7 Brahmins and the Buddha. So what we are going to do, we will be looking at some of the chapters today. And I begin with reading a bit of the first subpart, which is titled as Charge of Conversion by Glamour. So Buddha was charged that he is converting the people into his Dhamma by glamour, because he was such an eloquent speaker. He was a very good-looking human being. He was having that mystical, magical quality around him. But we know that the Buddha hadn't given, as we have seen in the past studies of the Buddha and his Dhamma, that the Buddha didn't give any emphasis on supernatural things. He didn't want to convert the people by miracles. And we have seen that the Buddha never wanted to convert people by miracles or showing them, demonstrating any personal or any mystical qualities. So here the Buddha is, is charged of conversion by glamour. And once the exalted one dwelt at Vaisali in the gable-roofed hall in the great wood. So this is the scene, this is the sutta that is spoken at Vaishali, and the Buddha was living in a place, in a hall, which was known as gable-roofed hall in the great wood. So there must be a Mahavana. Now Bhaddiya, the Lichavi, came to the exalted one and said, Lord, people say. So the Lichavis, as we have seen, were very, they had their democratic setup, and one among them, his name was Lichavi. He went to the Buddha. His name was Bhaddiya. Lichavi, he went to the Buddha, and he said to the Buddha this, Lord, people say Gautama the recluse is a charmer and knows a trick of glamour, whereby he entices the followers of other sects. So that was a charge of the Buddha, that Buddha is having this charming quality. He knows the trick of glamour, and thereby he entices the followers of other sects. They who say this disclaim any desire to misrepresent the exalted one. Indeed, Lord, we Lichavis do not believe in this charge, but we would like to know what the exalted one has to say about it. So the Lichavis were, of course, following the Buddha, and they said that they don't believe it, that the Buddha is converting the people by charm or by trick of glamour. But they say that now the people have been talking like this. Can you please explain us what is your stand on this? Do you convert the people by glamour? The law said, come now, Bhaddiya, accept not on hearsay, nor by tradition, nor by what people say. Accept not because it is in the scriptures, by mere logic, nor by inference, nor by consideration of appearances, nor because it accords with your view, nor because you think it might be right, nor out of respect with the thought that one must revere or recluse. So this is in the line of Kalama Sutta. As we have seen, it's a very famous sutta in the Buddhist scriptures, Kalama Sutta. And Bhaddiya is similarly asking the Buddha that, because I heard such and such thing, what do you think? And the Buddha says very beautifully, and I'm going to repeat and going to talk a little bit. We have already spoken about this, but it's worthwhile to remember these things when we study the Buddha's Dhamma. So the Lord said, come on, Baddiya, accept not on hearsay. So please do not accept anything because people are talking about it. Do not accept anything because there is a talk around about it. Okay. So accept not on hearsay, nor by tradition. Even don't accept something because it is handed over down by the tradition. Isn't it? Don't accept anything because of mere hearsay. Do not accept anything because it is handed down by the tradition, because the traditions can be wrong. Nor by what people say. So even if many people are saying this, do not accept it. Accept not because it is in the scripture. See, it's very, very fundamental. The Buddha says that even do not accept anything because it's really written in the religious books. We are not supposed to accept whatever written in the religious books as well. The Buddha says like that. By mere logic. See, sometimes we think that, if the logic accords with what, whatever is being said, we tend to accept it. But sometimes the logic has a limit. Sometimes what logic can be just the play of words. Sometimes the logic can be the play of syntax. Sometimes the logic can be a play of structural way of arranging the things. It might not accord with the reality. So Buddha says, do not accept mere by logic, nor by inference. You see, this logic and inference have been considered to be the two modes of knowing the reality in Buddhist philosophy. But here the Buddha is saying that please do not accept anything because it is accordance with logic and in accordance with inference, nor by consideration of appearance. Because, by appearance, if certain things looks, believable, do not accept it. Isn't it? Because sometimes we tend to take things by its face value. Sometimes the speaker who is talking about certain things, we like them. So we try to accept them as they say. So the Buddha says, do not accept, mere by consideration of appearances, nor because it accords with your view. Because sometimes we have the peculiar views in our mind, and if something accords with that view, we tend to accept it. But sometimes our own views can be wrong. And because our own views are wrong, they are trying to comply with the views out there, the entire thing might become completely wrong. So, we do not have to accept because it is in accordance with the views that we have already held. Nor because you think it must be right. Because you yourself think that it must be right. That's why you tend to accept it. The Buddha says, don't do that. Don't accept something because you think that it must be right. That's why you accept it. Nor out of respect. So even if you respect somebody too much, and if they say something, please do not accept it as it is. Isn't it? Do not accept it because, you respect somebody. With the thought that one must revere or recluse. Even if it's a spiritual person who is telling you all this, do not accept it. And I think this is very fundamental. I'm going to read the verse number 3 again. The Lord said, come now, Baddiya, accept not on hearsay, nor by tradition, nor by what people say. Accept not because it is in the scriptures, by mere logic, nor by inference, nor by consideration of appearances, nor because it accords with your view, nor because you think it must be right, nor out of respect, with the thought that one must revere electrically. You see? So these are the criteria by which we are not supposed to accept anything. But Baddiya, now listen very carefully. And we have been talking about this all the time in our classes. But Baddiya, if at any time you know of yourself by examination of facts, see, the examination or pariksha has been a very important tool in Buddhism. The Buddhist philosophers, the Buddhist thinkers use this tool so often that, the Buddhism begins with pariksha, the Buddhism begins with chikitsa, the Buddhism begins with analysis. Now, what do we analyze? So in the verse number 4, but Baddiya, if at any time you know of yourself by examination of facts, that what is being done is sinful or wrongful. So we examine something, we examine what is being said, and what is being done is sinful or wrongful. We try to know whether it's kushal or akushal. We try to know whether it's sinful or wrongful, that it is reproached by the wise. So if the wise people are not in accordance with, it is reproached by the wise, and the result is loss or injury, then Bhaddiya, eschew them, avoid them. So whatever, we examine, after examination, we find that these things being done, it's sinful, wrongful, and it's not, praised by the wise, and it results into loss and injury. Then Bhaddiya, eschew them. Then Bhaddiya, don't follow them. Then Bhaddiya, keep yourself away from those actions. Now, as to your question, Bhaddiya, what think you? Are not those who accuse me of performing conversion by glamour ambitious person? They are, Lord, replied Bhaddiya. So the Buddha says that I don't convert the people by glamour. I don't even convert people. I am just a Margadata. I just show them the path, and it's up to them whether they want to walk on the path or not. They have to choose. I never try to magically convert anybody. I just lay down the truth. I just lay down the facts before them, and they have to consider the facts themselves. And after having considered the facts themselves, it is up to them to choose what they want to do and what they would like to do. So you tell me, Bhaddiya, now, the Buddha says, now as to your question, Bhaddiya, what think you? What do you think? Are not those accuse me of performing conversion by glamour? Ambitious person, they are, Lord, replied Bhaddiya. What think ye, Bhaddiya? Does not an ambitious person, overcome by avarice and with mind overpowered, tell lies or commit crime to achieve his ambitions? It is so, Lord, replied Bhaddiya. What think you, Bhaddiya, when thoughts of ill will and vindictiveness arise in the mind of such a person, does he not instigate others to level accusations against those who come in the way of his ambition? That is so, Lord, said Bhaddiya. Now, Bhaddiya, all I do is to exhort my pupil thus. Now, what does the Buddha do? If he doesn't convert the people by magic or by glamour, what does the Buddha do? Now, Bhaddiya, all I do is to exhort my pupil this. I just encourage my pupil this. How do I encourage my pupil this? All I do is to encourage my pupil this. What does the Buddha do? So, now, Bhaddiya, all I do is to exhort my pupil thus. Come you, my dear man, dwell controlling thoughts of avarice. So dwelling, you will not commit act born of avarice, either by body, work, or thought. Dwell controlling ill will and ignorance. This is what the Buddha says. This is what the Buddha encourages his disciples to do. What does the Buddha encourage his disciple to do? Now, Bhaddiya, all I do is to exhort my people thus. Come you, my dear man. The Buddha says, come you, my dear man. Dwell controlling thoughts of avarice. You guard your thought. Don't be greedy. If the greed arises in your mind, you try to be mindful. You try to control it. So dwelling, you will not commit acts born of avarice, either by body, by work, or thought. So body, mind, and speech. Dwell controlling ill will and ignorance. The three poisons have to be controlled like this. Raga, dosa, and moha. Whenever they arise in our minds, we have to guard our minds. So dwelling, you will not commit acts or born of avarice, either by body, work, or thought. Dwell controlling ill will and ignorance. That's what the Buddha says. So, Bhaddiya, those recluses and Brahmins who wrongly reproach me with being a teacher and proclaimer of such views are false, empty liars when they say the recluse Gautama is a charmer and knows a trick of a glamour whereby he entices the followers of other sects. So that is what the Buddha does. A lucky thing indeed, O Lord, a fair find is this trick of glamour. Lord, would that my beloved blood relations were enticed by this same trick of glamour. So you see, the Bhaddiya says now, the trick that he used is so fine, and he says that it's a fair, way of teaching the people. And he says that I wish that all my beloved blood relation should be enticed by your glamour. It would indeed conduce to their advantage and happiness. If they follow you like this, if they get converted to your Dhamma like this, it will lead them to their advantage and happiness. Lord, would all the classes, the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and Sudras, were enticed by the same trick of glamour, it would indeed conduce to their advantage and happiness for a long time. It is so, Bhaddiya, if all the classes enticed by this trick of glamour were to eschew sinful conditions, my trick would result in a great advantage and happiness to the world. You see, so what is the Buddha's trick? The Buddha's trick, the Buddha's glamour is to encourage all of us to guard our minds, to examine everything factually, try to know everything as it is. And that is what the Buddha asked us to do. He asked us to rather challenges us to examine everything. Buddhism, as I said in several classes, that it begins with pariksha. It begins with the examination of the facts, not with the theories about the world or the theories that the religions or any other things have been throwing to us. Facts of life, what is happening in the day-to-day life. The Buddhism is in the small events that take place around us. The Buddhism is in every act of a body, speech, and mind. How do we behave? Whether we act by greed, hatred, or delusion, whether we act with love, whether we act with generosity, whether we act with profound examination. All these things, if we bring them together, the Buddha says that if all people are converted by this trick of examination of the facts, then the world will be more better, the world will be more happy, and there will be a lot of advantage to the world if they follow like this. So you see, that was a charge against the Buddha, that the Buddha is trying to convert people by glamour. And as we have seen in this sutta addressed to Baddiya, the Buddha has refuted the charge of converting the people by glamour. And he says that his way of converting or, encouraging the people is to examine their own minds, encourage them to examine everything around them, including their minds. And in the light of that examination, see for themselves where what is being said, done, or, thought of, whether it leads to sinful or wrongful action, or it leads to the kind action or the right action in the world. And if that is there, so if that is there, can you hear me now? Am I audible?
Yes. Yeah, there's a connection problem. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Because my internet is shaky, little bit shaky. So the Buddha says that this charge of accusation of Buddha converting the people by glamour is not acceptable to the Buddha. So and the Buddha has very categorically taught as to how it is. So the second is the charge of being a parasite. So the Buddha was accused of being a parasite. Buddha was told that he is a parasite. And it is the same thing, one of the accusations on the Buddha, that he is a parasite and he lives by the labor of others. And in this part too, we will be looking at that. So it's a very famous sutta. It comes in the Sutta Nipat, Kasi Bharadwaja Sutta. And I'm going to read it through, and then I'm going to gloss over some of the important points in the sutta. So the Blessed One was accused of being a parasite, living upon others and not earning his living by working for it. The accusation and the reply of the Blessed Lord is set out below. Was the Lord was living among the Magadha folk at Dakshinagiri in the Brahmin village of Ekanala, at a time when the Brahmin Kasi Bharadwaj 500 plows were harnessed for sowing. So there was a farmer, Kasi Bharadwaj, and he was plowing the field with 500 plows. In the early morning, duly robed and bowl in hand, the Lord went to where the Brahmin was busy at an hour when a mill was brought forward and stood there to one side. So the Buddha was there holding his bowl, and the farmer is, plowing the field. Observing him standing there for alms, the Brahmin said, "Before I eat, I plow and sow." Anchorites, and you too should plow and sow before you eat. So this is what Kasi Bharadwaj told to the Buddha, that, you are an idle man. Before I eat, I plow and sow. Anchorite, and you too should plow and sow before you eat. Now the Buddha's answer is very interesting. What is the Buddha's answer? I too, Brahmins, do plow and sow before I eat. So Buddha says that, I am also, a farmer. I plow and I do sow before I eat. I fail, however, to see the worthy Gautama's yoke or plow or plowshare or goad or ox team, albeit he asserts that he plows and sows before he eats. So Kasi Bhardwaj tells to Buddha that he has failed to see the Gautama's yoke or plow. Where is Buddha? Where is your yoke? Where is your plow? Where are your bullocks? Where is your ox? Where is your goad? And he says that, and he asserts that he plows and sows before it. So that is what Kasi Bhardwaj tells to the Buddha. He further says, you claim to be a tiller, though we see none of your tillage. Tell us how you till, for of your tilling we would fain hear more. So he says, please tell us, how do you till? For of your tilling we would fain hear more. The Buddha says, my seed is faith. Listen carefully. The Buddha says, my seed is faith. Austerity of my life, my reign. So if you begin to limit your dealing with the world in terms of the sensuality, what happens? The Buddha says it's like a rain. So Buddha has a faith, and the Buddha's faith is the seed. Austerity of life, my reign. Wisdom, my yoke. So wisdom is Buddha's yoke. And flow. My pole is fear to err. So Buddha says that my pole that holds him together is the fear that he should not make a mistake. With thought to strap the yoke, and mindfulness of plowshare and the goad, replied the Lord. Watchful over word and deed, and temperate in diet, I make in sight weed my crop, nor rest till final bliss is harvested. Effort is my stout ox, which turns not back at headlands. Straight to peace he bears me on, to that last bone where anguish is no more. Thus I till with deathlessness for crop, and who tills as I is freed from ills. It's a very interesting teaching of the Buddha. And it's a very practical. Sometimes, the Buddhism is considered as very abstract, as very romantic. But it is said that the images of meditation and all, they are very rustic. They are borrowed from the day-to-day lives of the people. They are borrowed from the farming practices in the world, because that time the farming was one of the major vocations. And the meditation is not something very sophisticated in terms of understanding it. It's very rugged, it's very rustic, it's very raw in terms of the practices of the world that we see outside. For example, like farming. The word for meditation is bhavana, means cultivation. And the cultivation is, of course, related largely with agriculture, because we cultivate. And how do we cultivate? When we cultivate, we clean the land, we plow the land, then we water the land, and then we put the seeds, and then we raise the plants, and then we harvest the tilling. So the Buddha is giving us a very concrete sort of an image. And that was the beauty of the teacher Buddha, that he could communicate something in the way the people have experienced in their day-to-day life. Buddha was somebody who could talk in the language of the people, by which they can understand his teachings very well. And as we have seen in the past studies, that the Buddha has tried to take into account the thoughts or the vocations of the people before he taught them. And that is the beauty of the great teacher, the Buddha, that he could teach his Dhamma to the different audiences, depending on their backgrounds. And that is the great quality of the Buddha. That's why, whenever we study any sutta, the preface is very important. Like here, Kasi Bhardwaj is doing, he's doing his farming, and Buddha is sitting there, holding the ball. You imagine a situation: the farmer is farming, and the Buddha is holding the ball, and he's accusing the Buddha that you are idle, you don't eat by your own labor, you beg. And the Buddha is saying that, no, I don't do that. I am like a farmer like this. I cultivate the land. But what land I cultivate? I cultivate the minds of the people, isn't it? And cultivating minds of the people is not an easy job. You imagine the life of the Buddha. The Buddha's life was very difficult life. If we take it from a standard of a normal human being, traveling all the time, irrespective of weather, only in the rains, he used to stay at one place, and rest of the time in his life, the Buddha used to travel far and wide on his feet. And irrespective of whether he will get his meal, whether he will get his next meal, Buddha's life is not easy. It's a difficult life. But even then, the people like Kasi Bhardwaj are addressing the Buddha that they live by the labor of other people. So the point that I am trying to put across here is that The Buddhism is not something, it's not something, some kind of a romantic, sophisticated teaching. It is. The Buddhism has many layers, but the Buddhism can be understood as a bare, fact of life. Whatever we see around us, like the Buddha has seen the complete Dhamma in a lotus. The Buddha has seen a complete Dhamma in the rice stack. And the Buddha has, we can similarly, see the Dhamma around us if we are watchful, if we are mindful. There are a lot of cases like that. When Shuddhodana saw the falling leaf, he was enlightened at his deathbed. He understood the truth of impermanence. And there are many cases like that in Buddhism. The so-called mundane events, if people are looking at them with careful consideration, with watchful mind, suddenly, the truth of the Dhamma can dawn upon them. So here, this shows that, the Buddha has the ability to teach the Dhamma in people's context, in context of their vocation, in context of their mentality. And that is what we all need to understand when we try to teach the Dhamma. So I'm going to read verse number 8 and 9 again. My seed is faith, austerity of life my reign, wisdom my yoke and flow. My pole is fear to err, with thoughts to strap the yoke, and mindfulness for flow share and the good, replied the Lord, watchful over word and deed, and temperate in diet, I make in sight with my crop, nor rest till final bliss is harvested. Effort is my stout ox, which turns not back at headlands. Straight to peace, he bears me on to that last boon where anguish is no more. Thus I till with deathlessness for crop, and who tills as I is freed from ills. Thereupon the Brahmin served up milk rice on a great bronze dish and offered it to the Lord, saying, Eat this, Gautama, a tiller indeed art thou, in that thou tilled a crop that is deathless. Amruta. Deathless means Amruta, Amata. And Amata is the another word for Nirvana. So he says that your crop is Nirvana. Your crop is deathlessness. Appamada, apramada. The word is apramada. Appamada, pamada. So there is a beautiful gatha which I have recited in the previous class. Appamado amata padang, pamado machuno padang, appamatta namiyanti ye pamatta yatamata. Those who strive, they never, the striving is the path to the deathlessness. Appamado amata padang. Appamado amata padang. Pamado machuno padang. So those who are heedless, those who do not make efforts, they are, that's a path to the death. Appamatta namiyanti. Those people who are striving, they never die. Ye pamata yathamata. Those who never make efforts, they are dead already. Isn't it? So making effort, striving, and this is the last word of the Buddha. Appamado amata padang. Vaya dhamma sankara, appamadena sampadeta. All the conditioned things are you perish or they are impermanent. So strive with diligence. That were the last words of the Buddha. So here the Buddha is striving, the Buddha is acting, the Buddha is working, and we are all supposed to work hard as the Buddha did to attain to that deathlessness or amrita or amata or nirvana. But the Lord said, I take no chanter's fees. So he says, I don't take a fees from you. You are offering me this rice, milk rice, the precious food. This nourishes the body and mind. But, I don't take fees. I take no chanter's fees. Seers countenance it not. The enlightened scout such fees. And while this doctrine lasts, this practice must hold good, provided with other fair a sage of holy calm, consummate, cankerless, merit to reap so there. You see, the Buddha says that, I don't take food just like that. Isn't it? I don't take your food or anybody's food just like that. That's not my vocation to beg. Isn't it? He says that, my thing is to teach the doctrine. And, if people just beg for their food, it will not help the doctrine to last long. So for the Dhamma to last long, there has to be the teaching before one, partakes food from others. This practice must hold good, provided with other fair, a sage of holy calm, consummate, cankerless, merit to reap, so there. So he says that if you sow your merit in those people, where you find holy calm, the sage of holy calm, consummate, who has achieved some level of awakening, cankerless, merit to reap, sow there. He says, sow your seeds there so that you will benefit from it. See, this is a very astonishing verse, isn't it? The Buddhism has been looked down by a lot of people, that it considered by as the religion of people who rely on the society, but it's not so. The Buddha says that whatever they earn, they deserve to earn. They deserve to eat only when they strive like this. And the Buddhism is a religion, or is the way of life of striving hard. It is a way of life of active active engagement with the world. It's a way of life of being active with the communities. On hearing these words, the Brahmin went over to the Lord and, bowing his head at the Lord's feet, cried. So Kasi Bhardwaja bowed down at the feet of the Buddha and he cried, "Wonderful Gautama, quite wonderful. Just as a man might set upright again what had fallen down, or reveal what had been hidden away, or tell a man who had fallen down, or reveal what had been hidden away, or tell a man who had gone astray which was his way, or bring a lamp into darkness, so that those with eyes to see might see the things about them. Even so, in many ways has Gautama made his doctrine clear." This passage comes often in a lot of various suttas, but this passage is very beautiful. What happens when the people begin to see what the Buddha is trying to teach them? What happens to them? This is what happens to them. Wonderful. They feel wonderful. Wonderful Gautama, quite wonderful. Just as a man might set upright again what had fallen down. So you had set down what was upright. You have set it straight. Reveal what had been hidden away. You have revealed what was hidden in the plain sight. That's what happens when we are awakened to the Buddha's Dhamma. Or tell a man who had fallen down. So a man who had fallen down, a patit, you tell them that they are fallen down. Or reveal what had been hidden away, or tell a man who had gone astray, and somebody might have missed his way. You are telling them what is the correct path. And or bring a lamp into darkness. Oh, what a beautiful example this is, to bring a lamp in the dark, so that those with eyes to see might see the things about them. Even so, in many ways has Gautama made his doctrine clear. To the Reverend Gautama, so Kasi Bhardwaja says, to the Reverend Gautama, I come for refuge, and to his doctrine and his community. So I take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. Be it mine to receive admission. So it's my responsibility to seek admission. Be it mine to receive admission and confirmation at the hands of Lord. So may the Lord confirm whether he accepts me as his disciple. So the Brahmin Kasi Bhardwaj was admitted and confirmed as an honest man of the Lord. So that's how he was confirmed, because the Buddha came to know that he has understood his Dhamma. So what I'm going to do here is stop with these two subparts, and we'll be continuing the other subparts in the latter classes. And I would end here, and I would open up the class for any question and answer, or anything that anybody would like to share. So anything anybody would like to share?
The reference of Kalam Sutta comes again and again.
Yes.
In this text. Do not accept hearsay nor by tradition, or not whether it is written in the scriptures.
True.
Right. We should use our wisdom.
Yeah.
We should have our own views, that is view, and act accordingly, and not to believe in whatever is said or written in the books, or like.
Yes.
So wisdom and right view is necessary.
Yes. That's very true, because that's where the Buddhism begins. The Buddhism is not a dogma. The Buddhism is not a set of belief. The Buddhism is not something to be accepted just like that. We have to examine, we have to apply our mind. Buddhism is the religion of efforts.
Yes. We should investigate, inquire.
Yes.
And what is the cause of this reason?
Yes.
And explain.
Yes. Very true, Alka madam. Very true. And that's the attitude that we should even have when we study the Buddha's Dhamma or listen to anybody, just for ourselves to know what is it that, what's happening, the facts of life, instead of going for the theories. Because lot of the times we want to take the shortcut. We just want to accept the theories as it is. And because we try to accept the theories as it is, we are not able to, understand a lot of things, because we are not applying our mind. And the Buddha says that we have to apply our mind. The Buddha says we need to apply our mind. We have to make effort, striving, appamada, and this sort of a striving is so important, even to change ourselves and the world outside, isn't it? So instead of just accepting anything as it is, or accepting anything because it's coming by tradition, because it is written in the book, that way our mind is not active. That way our minds are very lazy. That way our minds are not able to make progress. And to make progress, we have to really apply. And that's why, the Buddhist meditation is not something related with some romantic stages of mind, but it's related with, active progress of the mind towards freedom. If we read the descriptions of the meditation in the Buddhist text, we see the dynamic, the very effortful, description in the Buddhist texts. And similar like that, the dealing with the impurities, there is a word tapa. Tapa means to burn, and it has certain connotation, to burn the impurities. Impurities is not going to happen just like that unless we make efforts, unless we strive, unless we really put ourselves in the practice of the Dhamma.
Yes.
So anything from anybody? Vidya, Sunil Bhav, Umesh, Pankaj, Rahul, Shashank.
Sir, only one reflection.
Yes.
The Buddha and in Dhamma is a similar thing that we are studying, as the phrase Buddha has said to the farmer, I think, no?
Yeah.
And for practicing it, for cultivating the land, for cultivating the mind, we need to be dedicated and regular and focused.
Yes. Yeah, and you see the example of the farming. If somebody has any experience of farming, they can see that if something goes wrong, if they don't make efforts, if they are not watchful, if they don't plow the field properly, if they don't take the weeds out, the crop will not, the yield will not be there, isn't it? So everything has to be done with great efforts, with great quality of awareness, with the great mindfulness, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Proper attention is required every time.
Yeah. And here we are dealing with the mind itself, and it's a very different sort of a regime altogether, isn't it?
Yes, sir. In NLP, what we study is mind is a meaning-making machine. Whatever event in front of us is happening, we just give meaning to it, beside giving a truthful and mindful attention towards that.
Yes. Yes, you are right. You are 100% right. So anybody? Anyone else?
Dada, I have a different question, not with this, not related with the
Please,
talk.
go on.
What is, like, there are 8 kind of dhyan, like pratham dhyan, dvitiya dhyan, tritiya dhyan, chaturth dhyan. Are they different from, like, reaching to Srotapanna, Anagami, or is it the same?
See, there are a lot of descriptions by which you can know this dhanas, but we have to understand it very in a simple manner. So to look at it like this, that there are our chitta operates in 4 realms. So one realm is the realm of the senses, which is called the kama vachara chitta. So the mind, which is in the realm of the senses, like five senses and the mind. Okay, so the mind, cognizes and makes concepts, conceptualization, lot of linguistic color to it. So, we are living in the realm of the senses. It's called kama vachara chitta. And the quality of the objects of the senses is to entice us. They are the main source of our greed, hatred, and delusion, right? So normally when we are all living in the kama vachara chitta, okay, the realm of the senses. And this realm that we share together is created by our sensory consciousness, right? So what happens in the meditation? We try to withdraw our chitta from this kama vachar chitta into more subtle mind. And that more subtle mind, can be cultivated by focusing on some kind of an object, which in the Buddhist tradition, we try to focus it on the breathing, right? And when we are trying to focus on the breathing, the first dhyana happens when our mind is cut off from the five senses, and it's in the realm of that object, where your mind is more refined, your mind is more calm, your mind is more peaceful. And then there is a technical description of the Prathama dhyana, Dutiya dhyana, Tritiya dhyana, and the Chaturtha dhyana. Okay, so these are in the realm of what is called the rupa vachar chitta, because there is a mind is taking the hold of a subtle rupa. And when we have achieved some fine degree of chitta, our mind can be trained in what is called the arupa vachara chitta or arupa vachara dhyana. And then when we cultivate further, we can cultivate the freedom of mind. We can cultivate the very the boundless state of mind, which is called the mind of the Buddha or Lokuttara Chitta. So let me simplify it like this for you. There are two levels of Chitta. One is called the worldly mind. And there is a Chitta which is gone beyond the mind of the Buddha or the Arahants, which is free, which is stainless, which is not bound by anything, which is free mind, which is not full of ignorance, which is full of prajna. So you see what I'm trying to get it at is, our mind operates in basically two levels. One is the worldly level and the mind which has gone beyond. So on the worldly level, we have three levels of chitta. We have one level of chitta is, the sensory consciousness, which is called the kama vachara chitta, where, we all dwell in that kama vachara chitta. But through mindfulness or, making efforts, we entered into the rupa vachara chitta and arupa vachara chitta. Okay, there is all beautiful description of that in the Buddhist text. And ultimately, we train ourselves to free our minds from all the impurities. So, we can go into that, and maybe in the future, we will conduct an entire series of lectures, classes on the jhana consciousness. I'm very keen to do that one day, to have a kind of a series of lectures, backed by the practices of the dhyana, so that we can begin to understand what is the Buddhist meditation system, right?
Fine.
So in verse number 6, ambitious person always he cannot control his passions, avarice. He has greed in his mind, and because of that greed, he doesn't follow Panchashila. He doesn't. He tells lies and he commits crime also.
Yes.
Such a person even goes to instigate others to commit such crime.
Yeah.
So here, the states to control the passions.
You see, when our mind is, involved in the world, the Buddha gives the example of a mirror, isn't it? So the mirror, and there is the practice that the Buddha taught, which is called the Paccavekkhana. And Paccavekkhana means like, the mirror reflecting. So our mind should be reflecting like this. And, after the reflection, if we find that whatever is going on in our mind, whether it is conducive to the welfare of the people or not, if it is, if it is conducive to the welfare of the people, we cultivate that kind of a mind. If we see that whatever is going on in our mind after interaction with the world, if we find that things leads to wrongful action, if that things leads to wrongful being in the world, then we try to cut our minds from that. And we don't cultivate that, and for that, we need a lot of efforts to do it. And one day, our minds are so much trained that, no impurity can take hold in those minds, isn't it? So the practice of the Panchashil becomes very natural to us. It becomes we don't have to think about doing good. Once we train our minds like this, the good in us just comes out, isn't it? So you're right. If people are deluded, if they are ambitious, if they don't examine their contents of mind, if they don't examine the content of the mind of the world, then it might leads to a lot of it might lead to a karma, and that's where how Baba Sahib Ambedkar has beautifully set the concept of karma, isn't it? The action in the world, and whether the world is good or bad, it doesn't depend on any god. It depends on the human action. It depends on how do we speak in the world, how do we act in the world, how do we think in the world, right? So that's a very good point, Alka ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think we are reaching to the end of a class, and if anybody has anything to say, please go on, or we will end our class and meet next week. Rahul, you have anything to say?
No, sir. Thank you. Understood, yes, properly.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, okay. Shashank? Pankaj, okay, then we will end our class and see you in the next class. Jai Bhim, Namo
Jai
Buddhaya.
Bhim. Jai Bhim.